Everyone knows that feeling, wanting to experience more stories, but struggling to find the time. That's where Audible changes everything. With over 1 million audiobooks and Audible originals, there's a story waiting to spark anyone's imagination. Take The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley, the gripping psychological thriller that's keeping listeners on the edge of their seats. Imagine unraveling its mysteries during your morning commute, or losing yourself in its twists and turns while doing household chores. That's the magic of Audible. It transforms daily routines into opportunities for thrilling discoveries. The best part? Members get access to thousands of included titles, with new content added regularly. From bestsellers to hidden gems, every genre imaginable is at their fingertips. And with one easy-to-use app, switching between favorites or discovering new passions has never been simpler. There's more to imagine when you listen. Start a free 30-day Audible trial and get your first audiobook free at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
Now it's time for Inspirational Women, and my guest, Kelly Campbell, a trauma-informed leadership coach and the author of the new book, Heal to Lead, Revolutionizing Leadership Through Trauma Healing. Kelly brings us the insights we need about being responsible for our own healing. It is different for each of us, but the healing work is entirely up to us. I think we may find that while it may feel daunting, there's really such a freedom we realize in our life. So let's meet Kelly to learn more. Kelly Campbell, good morning. Thank you so greatly for being with us today.
Kate, it's my pleasure.
Well, I am really thrilled that we have an opportunity to have this particular conversation because when we're talking about trauma, there's all this feeling like this negativity, and it is negative. But I feel that what you've done is taken this to transform it into being something positive and constructive. I mean, we don't want to have trauma, but it is part of our life. And with Heal to Lead, I feel that's what you've done. Am I on track here or kind of missing the point?
You're definitely on track. The way that I talk about trauma is not something that we consented to, right? So the traumatic events or experiences that we were on the receiving end of were not our fault. I think we can pretty much level set there, although there are many people who still live in the ideation that they were their fault, right?
Yeah.
However, shame sort of remains present in that when we say we're ashamed of the things that, have happened to us, that shame remains present until we take responsibility for our own healing. And that starts really by doing the work to integrate and actually release all of the things, all of these traumatic experiences that have been stored in our bodies for so long.
And that is such an important thing for us to embrace. And if we've been doing some healing work, it's probably a little easier. But do you find that this might be a shock to some people when you work on healing and with trauma with some of the people in your work? Do you find that they're shocked that they can let go of this because it wasn't their fault?
Well, the work that I do as a trauma-informed leadership coach isn't necessarily unpacking the trauma. That would really be the work of a therapist, a psychologist, maybe a psychiatrist. So I'm not unpacking that work with them, and no trauma-informed leader is unpacking their employees', trauma, for example. What we're doing more in those coaching sessions is correlating the things that have happened to them, the strategies that they've created, and how that's actually showing up in their leadership style. So it's really the underscore there is the trauma-informed leadership and how those past experiences and coping strategies and mechanisms, how they're continuing to play out in their leadership role.
Okay, so that's really important foundational work here, is to know that we've been doing the work and then to see how it actually is going to be a positive piece in our lives, how we make it work for us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I think the shock maybe comes when people start to learn a little bit more about how trauma resides in the body, because that seems like new information to people. And I think that for so long, we think of trauma and traumatic experiences as kind of locked in our memory bank, but it's actually not in our memories at all. It's stored in the body. right? And so we look to the work of Bessel van der Kolk and researchers and authors like that. So the trauma, when we say trauma lives inside of our body, that's new information because we don't understand that those traumatic experiences actually live in our nervous system. They live in our fascia. They live in our tissues. Some people have heard maybe the adage, the issues are in the tissues. That's what we mean by that, right? It's the trauma being stored inside of the body. And so we get stuck in these strategies and these sort of what I call like false narratives that historically have kept us safe and allowed us to survive really our formative years. But those now are the very things that are holding people back. And I think the correlation between those is the thing that is new information. I wouldn't say it's shocking, uh, but definitely new information and a new way to think about it.
And so that's such a critical piece here is to see how we do then think about it and make it work for us so that we don't feel that we are being held back or that we allow that holding back of the past.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So we have two things going on here. You have a new book that's available that is a great resource. I feel aren't books great to help us to guide us along before we go to seek further therapy or whatever it is they're learning, but the books are really wonderful.
Yeah, what I've heard so far from some of the early feedback, because the book is just newly out, is that it's helped people to really learn more about themselves and really come to this place of maybe not full acceptance by any means, but understanding more about the fact that these previous experiences weren't their fault, and that the book itself has actually created sort of a supportive environment for people to do their own self-exploration as they're reading. There are, questions along the way, reflection questions along the way. And so I've heard a lot of feedback that people are learning more about themselves through reading the book and starting to make these correlations and seeing the connectivity between how they grew up, what those experiences were, and how they have come into their adulthood and way of being now.
And that just reminds us that we never really arrive. We think, okay, I'm going to do this work and okay, it's done. And I'm in this better, greater, whatever, different space. Oh no, it's a new platform to start the next journey. So that makes so much sense that we have that experience. And I bet we read the book, have that experience, we can pick it up again in a month or 6 or whatever and realize, oh my gosh, here are more insights, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the thing to keep in mind is that there is no arrival, there is no destination, there
Mm.
is no quick fix. And so many people have really kept this work at a distance and have not intentionally engaged with it because it is lifelong. It is a lifelong commitment to heal, right? And I never use the word healed past tense, healed ED, because I don't actually believe that we can heal something outright. I think we can minimize and mitigate our reactions and the reactionary way in which we respond as different things activate us. Some people use the word trigger. But really, the way that this works is a healing is almost like a spiral. Think about it like an upward spiral, right? And we have adversity coming at us all the time. We're not in control of what happens externally. There's a person who cuts you off when you're on your way to work, or something in the news really activates you because it may remind you of something you've experienced when you were younger, or you just have to pay a bill, right? There are lots and lots of things that can really push on some of the things that we've experienced in youth. And so all of those things are going to come around over and over and over again. If you think about them like um, little tests, right? Little ways in which they come around in order to say, how much more work do you have to do on this particular piece, right? And so those will never stop. That's why it's lifelong work. It's not lifelong because the work is so hard, it takes forever, right? That's not what it is. It's that we're here as humans to experience the full spectrum of human emotion. And so we can't do that without facing adversities of all types and sizes, right? And so That's why it is lifelong, and that's why there is no destination. Maybe the destination, some people, depending upon what your belief system is, some people can say the destination is death, right?
Mhm.
That's the inevitable destination. And some people say, well, even after death, maybe there's a reincarnation. I'm going to continue this particular lesson in my next lifetime. Again, all dependent upon your belief system.
Right. And there's a part of this, and maybe this comes once we've been doing work on ourselves, within ourselves, that it kind of can have some excitement to it. Like, oh, this is a great awareness. Like, oh, this is why this is happening. And,
Yeah.
kind of light bulb moments going off. So that kind of an excitement that's encouraging.
I mean, it's very encouraging. And to be honest, that's probably why I am so passionate about this work, because I lived for the first, let's call it 36 years of my life, really through a lens of victimization. Oh, what happened to me? I was so identified with these experiences of what was imposed upon me. And I really forgot that I have agency. I can actually choose to take the steps to take responsibility for integrating the trauma that I experienced and then decide how I want to live the next 30, 40, 70 years, whatever it is, whatever I'm given. So it's really that act of taking responsibility, and then those little light bulb moments, those little things along the way that really are like, wow, I didn't see that connection. I didn't make that connection before. And now I'm seeing it. And now this makes sense. And now this puzzle piece fits. And so it can be really exciting. It can also be incredibly painful. And, I joke around that I wish that I had taken out stock in Kleenex before I started this work myself, and, even coaching, because the coaching container sometimes can elicit emotion. We wouldn't be doing transformative work if emotion wasn't coming up. It's part of the release process, right? So all of that emotion is absolutely welcome.
So the book, Heal to Lead, and you are coaching with leaders, but it also, I think, is each and every one of us being leaders of our own self, whatever it is that we do. We may not be leading a company, a corporation, a school, whatever it is, but it's really important to see how it applies to us as the individual.
You got it. So I say that the book is for emerging and established leaders. And then you fill in the blank, what are you leading, right? You could be just leading yourself, which is monumental in and of itself. You could be a leader in your social group, right? In your family, in your community, in the organization in which you work. Whatever it is, that part doesn't matter so much as, we all take on these leadership characteristics and ways of being, in the world, depending upon who we interact with and what we're drawn to and all of that. So there are a lot of people who may not they may not self-identify as leaders right out of the gate. But when we contextualize it and we say, well, leadership looks like this in terms of a spectrum and how that can be applied, then all of a sudden, if you ask a room of people, how many of you identify as leaders with that context, everyone's hand goes up. Right. So whether you're at the beginning of that and you're, younger in life, or you're more established, it doesn't matter. This book, yes, it is for organizational leaders, but really there are so many people who will learn a lot about themselves through the content.
And in that way, just being a leader in our own family, thinking of it in that context, how critically important and powerful that is, in the scope of the whole, all of life.
Well, think about, as a leader in your own family, whether you're a caregiver or not, right? Because that doesn't matter. You can be a leader as a child in a family.
Yes.
Um, there's a lot to be said for making sure that the ripple effect and the impact that you're having in whatever leadership role, using the family as an example, do you want to continue some historic pattern that is not serving the entire family, right? That organism, that entity? Do you want to perpetuate those things that are not healthy and are maybe even toxic? Or do you want to break that cycle? Do you want it to look different, right? And so these are questions that we ask ourselves, and then we can start to commit to making changes. We point out to ourselves, we become aware and observe, oh, I don't love the way that I'm showing up in this conversation or how I think about this particular person. I wonder if I could have a little bit more compassion, or I wonder if I could ask, what are they going through? What's happening on the other side for them? Because we're, as humans, we are great at making up stories about other people and their experiences and how they perceive us. And so much of that is actually rooted in our own trauma. And 90% of the time, it's false, right? So we create this chaos for ourselves many times.
Yes. And it's such important work, and I think it's always been. But when we look at the world around us, it feels even more critical that we
Yeah.
do this in for our own self, for our unit around us, and then how we are in the world and what we do, and see that in what we call the leaders in their positions. Doesn't it sometimes feel like they've not done the work that they need to do?
Many of them have not done the work. And what I talk about in the book is this sort of bifurcation between low conscious leaders and high conscious leaders. And really, the only difference between them is whether or not they're actively doing their healing work. We can recognize low conscious leaders by the way that they treat other people, by the things that they say, by sometimes the decisions that they make that don't actually um, really impact the whole in a positive way, right? They may be very self-serving, they may be very egoic. And so those are clear indicators that they have not done the work and that they are very wounded, right? So that's also where the compassion piece comes in.
Yes.
You can start to think about, well, what were the conditions in this other person's life that caused them to have these kind of reactions? People aren't jerks for no reason, right? We've all had a boss that was a jerk. That boss was not a jerk for no reason. Something happened to that person way back when. And most of the time when we encounter these low conscious leaders, they're responding to trauma that happened to them when they were younger that caused them to feel either deep shame or powerlessness. And so what they're doing now in their current iteration in their leadership role is they're making sure that they never feel powerless again. So they step on other people, they don't allow other opinions, they don't like their own authority challenged. We see this in lots of realms. Obviously, the political realm, we see this in corporations all the time. And as I said, I'm sure you and I have both had experiences with bosses where that was the case.
Yes, yes. And that is an important piece. Having the compassion. My feeling is, as we do this work on ourselves, we can begin to recognize those patterns and have that compassion. And we hope, I hope, that we're able to model, be the person that might encourage whoever that person is, our boss, the leader, to find that for themselves so they can do it, because it's freedom and it makes such a world of difference.
It is freedom. I'm so glad you used that word. It really is freedom. And it's not freedom on the other side, quote unquote, right? Because this is an active, ongoing
Hmm.
thing. It's freedom in those little moments, those little light bulb moments we were talking about before. When you start making these connections, compassion is a lot easier when it's like, well, this is the connection of why I am showing up the way that I'm showing up. I wonder, I get curious, is that the case maybe for this other person that I'm having conflict with, or noticing that they're being very reactive? So yeah, and compassion is a big part of it. In the book, I talk about high conscious leaders and high conscious leadership as four fundamentals, right? And so it's sort of a framework for how to return to your high conscious leadership, because I posit that this is not something that we have to become, it's something we have to return to. If you think about what trauma is, we were born whole and perfect and, really self-loving. And then from 0 to 14, maybe a little bit older, there are lots of other people's wounds and other people's projections that we absorb. And essentially what we're doing is we're making a decision in those moments. We're saying either my caregivers and the environment is flawed, right? Or I must be the flawed, broken thing. And so it's a lot easier for us to say, I am the broken or flawed thing, because the opposite, right? If it's the environment or my caregivers, how can I ever feel safe? So really, we turn this all on ourselves, and then the layering starts. We have all of these layers of silt, I guess I would call it, where, we almost can't get out from underneath it after, 14, 16, 20 years of other people's stuff and the narratives we create, right? And these coping strategies and all these things that just help us to survive. They're beautifully designed, by the way, but they really accumulate on our sense of being. And so when we step into these leadership roles, it's about peeling that off and cleaning that silt off to get back to our, what I say, our true nature, which is, more of a Buddhist philosophy, but the true nature of who we are, which is we want to lean into community. We want to support other people. We want to make sure that we're good stewards of the environment, right? So that's what this is. It's a return to all of that. And that's really the ethos of the book.
And it's so critically important for us at any time. But right now, we're at a place where we need to be doing this work. And it doesn't have to be long. But it's always ongoing. It's ongoing. I think we have to realize that just getting started and being able to brush back some of that silt.
Yeah.
Just get started and do it.
Yeah. In the book, there's also, because that was one of the things that I heard often from clients. How do I get started, right? If the only thing I've done is ever gone to therapy, maybe I had a positive, maybe I had a negative experience, what have you. What do I do beyond that, right? Like, where do I go? How do I start this? Is it just about meditating or journaling, right? Those are two options, right? But there are hundreds, maybe thousands of different modalities out there. And so I had overwritten the book by 12,000 words. And my developmental editor said, the book is great, but you overwrote it. So we have to take this big chunk out, and maybe you can make that an online resource, which actually ended up being perfect because that became a separate supplemental website called myhealingmenu.com. So the answer to where do I begin, right, is you can go to this first time or one of a kind resource where it breaks down all different types of practices and tools and modalities into like a restaurant menu, right? So the appetizers are like the cerebral resources, the podcasts, the books, the music that we might listen to, things that are kind of keeping us in our head. Then we kind of look at the sharing plates, things that where we may need a practitioner to support us. Then we have the somatic practices, things that are much more about moving the body and moving that trauma out of those tissues and out of that body in order to really integrate what has happened to us. And that's, I think, the really deep work. So I always say, start slow. And then the desserts, which are the richest of experiences and the things that we will probably engage with the least, those are plant medicines and psychedelics. And so while those can be incredibly effective for trauma healing, there's also a caveat with many of those because they do cause hallucinogenic effects. So people with pre-existing mental health conditions and people on medications like SSRIs, that would be contraindicated for them. But there's a whole host of things, and it's really about what calls you, because no one person's healing journey looks the same as another, right? We have had different experiences in the past, and then the healing of those experiences is going to look very different from person to person.
And I have to say, I found that was so brilliant. My healing menu. It's so clever, and how it is such a great companion to working with the book and going to these various experiences, and of course being online. It's just natural to do it. And I think intuitively, that's where we'll get in touch with ourselves to know what we're drawn to and to trust that, right?
Yeah. And so that's another part of healing and integration is starting to develop that relationship with the body, noticing sensations, really trusting that intuition. If you loved dancing when you were a kid, as an example, and you go on to something like My Healing Menu and you see that there's a particular type of dance that would be really good for somatic work and trauma healing, or even just jumping on a trampoline, or anything in that realm that kind of brings you joy but also has you moving your body. Those are great experiences, and that you're naturally drawn to because you loved that as a kid,
Mhm.
right? And so it's really about connecting back with that inner child, letting them know that the adult version of you has their back now, and you can begin to repair what happened to them, maybe if, there were traumatic experiences in the past.
Yes. It's so wonderful. You must feel elated, both, of course, in your own healing, but the fact that you're able to take the experience and be sharing it with others and seeing how it's working so well in their lives as well.
I mean, it feels, really wonderful because there's a purpose to all of it,
Mm,
right?
yes.
These experiences that I'm talking about are very much firsthand. And so, again, my journey is going to look incredibly different from anyone else's. There will never be two that are the same. But really, my North Star is impact. And once I got clear on that, it became easier to be vulnerable with my own story and to share it, in parts throughout the book. So the fact that I'm getting this feedback for people to say, wow, I really learned about myself through even the stories that you told about your upbringing or your dad or your mother or your coach, or yeah, I had something like that, or my parents got divorced when I was 9 too. All of these, sort of every person's stories are so resonant for people. And so it became a lot easier to say, okay, well, if there needs to be, or I felt like there needed to be a reason why these things happened. And if the reason was impact, if the reason was other people learning about themselves, maybe getting into therapy, maybe, engaging with some of these trauma healing modalities, what more becomes possible? And what is the ripple effect outside of just them? People in their families, people in their work environments. The more people that do this work and the more that they're awakening to this higher level of consciousness,
Mhm.
we're going to be living in a very different world. And it's no more needed, back to your point, it's no more needed than right now.
Yes. And in that, there's such great hope. It's needed. We have the pathways to be working on it. And all we can control, I always like to remember this, all we control is ourselves. So if we do this, that makes a difference. And we trust that how we are different impacts others. So, it is but we also feel so elated as we see those light bulbs go off, or we see these changes. It's so encouraging, and you're really such a great coach for us in that way, Kelly.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, just it feels purposeful. It feels like, again, the more that you do this work, the more that your purpose and your like what you are here to contribute
Mhm.
during this life comes online for you. It becomes clearer and clearer and clearer. And this felt like the most true thing. I used to own a digital marketing agency and we did beautiful work in the world. We really focused on amplifying the mission and the vision and the voice of nonprofits and foundations and social impact initiatives that were doing lovely, beautiful, impactful work in the world. So that felt purposeful. And after 14 years of running that company, it became so apparent to me that that really wasn't what I was here for, right?
Mhm.
So, as uncomfortable as it was to recognize that I needed to let that go, I'm really glad that I listened to that. And and my hand was sort of forced into that a little bit because I was just so unhappy, so unhappy. And having the experience of being a CEO in retrospect, making those connections and seeing how I led from that place of really a trauma response, and really unintegrated trauma, even though I had been in talk therapy for almost 20 years in total at that point. That wasn't going to get me to where I needed to go from a trauma integration standpoint, right? So there's a little bit of a difference that I talk about in terms of mental health maintenance, right? Our talk therapy, um, remedial coaching, sort of that break fix coaching, superficial self-care, which is like soothing, right? All of these things are really mental health maintenance. They're really there to talk and soothe. Trauma integration modalities are many of the things that are on my healing menu, and that's where we're talking about really getting to the root of it. I love to go deep, whether, whatever it is that I'm talking about and the relationships that I have. So depth to me, I mean, I feel like very much I am the right person to, bring this conversation to light. It feels incredibly exciting to me to go into plunge those depths and to really get at the root of what is actually happening here, because surface level things and band-aids and that just doesn't work for me. So, yeah.
Which I think, if we're really honest, doesn't work for any of us.
It doesn't, but we pretend that it does.
Yeah, there's that. That's how you're so refreshing. I just so appreciate you. I'm so thrilled that we have this book, Heal to Lead, that can guide us along. And then, of course, the very wonderful My Healing menu online to work with. So the book is available. It's new. It's available at any of our favorite book sources. True?
Yeah, you can also get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. There's a little bit more information about it on my website if you want to learn more about it before you take the step to buy it. So that is klcampbell.com.
Great. Well, Kelly, it's just really been such a wonderful time to spend with you. I feel so much more hopeful that, there's these great tools to help all of us along. And thank you for doing the work and for following your own intuition.
Thank you so much, Kate.
You're so welcome. That brings us to the end of a very full hour of Inspirational Women with Kelly Campbell and Sunday Morning Magazine with Pam Nepper and Corinna Krauskopf. I'm Kate Daniels, your host, and I greatly appreciate your sharing this hour with me and these special guests. For details you might have missed or information you'd like to know, please just send me an email, kated@warm1069.com, and I will get right back to you. Also, if you'd like to listen again or to share these stories with your family and friends, find the podcast on our Warm 1069 webpage. Just click on the Listen tab, then Podcasts, then either of the show names, and then look for the guest names. I now wish you and your family a day of generosity. When we give to ourselves, we can't help but give to others. Have a week of the same, and then please plan to join me again next weekend for another hour of Sunday Morning Magazine and Inspirational Women on Warm 1069. Good morning.